Let's discuss a man who got sentenced to an eternity of pointless physical labor for the crime of being smarter than the people in charge, which, if you think about it for more than 5 seconds, is an extremely uncomfortable precedent for anyone currently employed at a job they didn't actually choose so much as fall into out of financial necessity. His name was Sisyphus, and his punishment is the closest thing ancient mythology ever produced to a perfect metaphor for your Monday through Friday existence. Sisyphus was, by most accounts, a king, and not a particularly humble one. He was clever, manipulative, and had a documented habit of outsmarting gods, which, as we've already established in a previous chapter of cosmic stupidity involving a titan and an eagle, is generally a poor long-term career strategy. Sisyphus's specific crimes varied depending on which ancient source you trust, but the general theme remained consistent. He tricked death itself into being chained up, which delayed his own demise considerably longer than the universe had originally scheduled. He betrayed secrets that mortals weren't supposed to know. He generally treated cosmic rules the way most of you treat the terms and conditions on a software update, as an inconvenience to be skipped past as quickly as possible. Eventually, the gods got tired of this particular human refusing to stay properly dead and properly humbled, and they devised a punishment so perfectly, almost artistically cruel, that it's remained the gold standard for eternal torment for roughly 3,000 years. Sisyphus was sentenced to push an enormous boulder up a steep hill. Simple enough, you might think. Plenty of mortals have pushed plenty of boulders up plenty of hills throughout history and lived to discuss it afterward. Here's the twist that makes this particular punishment so uniquely horrifying. Every single time Sisyphus got that boulder almost to the top, every single time, without exception, without a single instance of progress being preserved, the boulder would roll back down to the bottom, and he would have to start over. Forever. Not metaphorically forever in the sense that humans use the word when they're exaggerating about a long commute. Actually, literally, mathematically, forever. With zero possibility of completion, zero possibility of the task being marked done, zero possibility of ever experiencing the basic human satisfaction of finishing something he started. Now, before you start feeling smugly superior to a fictional Greek king from several thousand years ago, let's take an uncomfortably honest look at your own weekly schedule, mortals. You wake up. You commute to a job that, statistically speaking, you would abandon immediately if you won enough money to never need it again. You complete a task. The task gets undone, consumed, used up, or simply forgotten by the time you arrive the next morning, and you start over. The email inbox that reaches zero on Friday is somehow full again by Monday. The dishes you washed last night are dirty again by tonight. The house you cleaned gets messy again within hours of finishing. The exhausting irony here, the part that should genuinely make you sit back in your chair for a moment, is that you've essentially recreated Sisyphus's exact punishment voluntarily, repeatedly, for decades. And instead of a vengeful god forcing it on you, you call it a career, a mortgage, or sometimes, with a particularly impressive level of self-deception, a calling. Here's where the story takes an unexpected turn that the ancient Greeks, in their limited Bronze Age wisdom, never quite anticipated. In the 20th century, a French philosopher named Albert Camus looked at this exact same myth and arrived at a conclusion that the original storytellers almost certainly didn't intend. Camus wasn't interested in Sisyphus as a cautionary tale about the dangers of outsmarting gods. He was interested in Sisyphus as the single most accurate representation of what it actually feels like to be a conscious being trapped in an indifferent universe that owes you absolutely nothing in the way of meaning, purpose, or cosmic fairness. Camus pointed out something that most people, in their rush to either despair or distract themselves, completely fail to notice about the myth. There's a moment every single time when Sisyphus walks back down the hill to retrieve his boulder. That walk down is the only part of the entire ordeal where he isn't actively straining, pushing, or suffering. It's a pause, a breath, a few minutes of pure, conscious awareness with absolutely nothing forcing his attention elsewhere. And Camus argued that in that walk back down the mountain, Sisyphus becomes something far more interesting than a victim of cosmic punishment. He becomes the only character in the entire myth who fully understands his own situation, with complete clarity, and chooses to walk back down anyway, without illusion, without false hope that this time will somehow be different, and crucially, without despair either. Camus ended his entire philosophical essay on this myth with one single sentence that has been quoted, printed on posters, tattooed onto skin, and almost certainly misunderstood by 90% of the people who've ever shared it online. He wrote that we must imagine Sisyphus happy, not because the boulder stops rolling back down. It doesn't. Not because the task suddenly becomes meaningful in some grand cosmic sense. It doesn't do that either. Sisyphus becomes happy, according to Camus, specifically because he stops waiting for the universe to hand him a reason, and instead generates his own relationship to the act itself, fully aware that it's endless, fully aware that no God is going to show up and explain why any of this matters, and chooses to keep pushing anyway, because the alternative, sitting at the bottom of the hill in despair, accomplishes absolutely nothing except adding suffering to an already absurd situation. This is, in case it hasn't fully landed yet, mortals, an almost perfect description of your own existence, minus the dramatic Greek mountain backdrop. Nobody is coming to explain why you have to wake up tomorrow and do largely the same things you did today. There's no cosmic certificate of completion waiting for you once you've raised your children, paid off your mortgage, and optimized your morning routine into a seamless productivity machine. The laundry returns. The emails return. The hunger returns every single day until the day it finally doesn't, at which point the matter becomes entirely irrelevant to you personally anyway. The boulder always rolls back down. That part was never up for negotiation, and pretending otherwise is just an elaborate form of self-harm dressed up as optimism. But here's the genuinely subversive part of this whole myth. The part that should annoy you slightly less than everything else I've said in this video. The fact that the boulder rolls back down doesn't actually determine whether the pushing itself can contain something worth experiencing. You don't need the task to end in order for the walking, the working, the small private moment of breath at the bottom of the hill to belong to you and only you. Sisyphus's punishment was designed by beings who assumed that meaning could only exist in completion, in finishing, in a final triumphant placement of the boulder at the summit. They never considered that a creature could simply look at an endless, pointless task and decide, with full clarity and zero illusions, that the act of doing it, on his own terms, in his own rhythm, was sufficient. Not because it was destined to matter, simply because he decided it would. And nobody, not even a god with infinite power and questionable judgment, could take that particular decision away from him. So push your boulder, fragile little laborers. It's rolling back down regardless of what you decide to feel about it. The only variable you actually control is whether you walk back down that hill in despair or whether you walk down it like someone who already understands the joke and finds it, against all logic, genuinely worth laughing at.